So you're going to do it in quick questions, and you're going to script out the kids that you are working with on each of these days after you've talked to everybody, which I think is a smart strategy to follow up individually. Then, once you followed up individually, how are you holding the whole class accountable to still using all the problem-solving strategies on other problems and like getting them right?
Well, it is like what we've talked about with like accountability, like making sure I'm getting around to holding each kid accountable. So adjusting teacher practice, so I am getting around. Putting it in criteria for success, like making sure kids know that like, that is going to be annotated. And then I think it's feedback is like going really well with Georgia Tech. Like getting them to hold each other accountable for annotating the problem, I think will be like really, really powerful. And like kids will want to annotate the problem to like show they did that.
How can you make sure, like, so you want to work on that teacher habit, how can you use this tool of the calendar here to hold yourself accountable to that? I mean, you can add columns if you want. Right?
I think that's something to sort of just periodically in the problem of the day scale. Just put in, like, just check, like, go through and like, that is what I'm looking for that problem of the day scale.
Yeah.
Scheduling out, like, random checks for that, to, like, keep it fresh.
So let's go ahead and just start that, and you're not going to get it, but I mean, you're not going to like complete this now. You're going to understand it completely. So like every 3 or 4, maybe just copy in like CFS, like look for annotating the problem. And then when you go in and put the actual skills in, you'll know that like that's what you're going to be looking for on those days. Keep on their toes with that.
The short.
Right. So once again, I think this is a good tool because it's gonna this is the one document you need to look at when figuring out like what am I doing today. For that, that's gonna also. So you mentioned like when they see problem of the day, they're like, all right, I'm gonna do all the things I do with problem solving. But you mentioned one of the big rocks is like problems in context. So like, I think some of this is going to be just make sure half of your homework problems are in context. And I would even like block that off here. Like problems 11 through 20 are just like exclusively problems in context, or whichever ones you decide. The other side is like in your independent practice, make sure that there are problems in context every day. And that can get you to the point where like kids don't need to see a problem of the day to know that like, I'm going to use all the strategies that help me solve complex problems for complex problems, regardless of what it says at the top. Cool. So I think we've definitely talked about strategies to help students approach word problems, partly through teaching explicit lessons on looking at the question, identifying relevant information. We've talked a little bit about how to increase the fluency by which you've already started. We've talked about conceptual problems, like numbers not necessarily. In the past, they weren't reflected in the problem, and now it looks like there's a plan to reflect them in that problem. So we've talked about most of this. I think the big takeaway for me is that like you have great ideas about things you want to do in class, and the issue is like remembering that you want to do all those things every day. You have a tendency to like, I'm going to start this project, and you start it, and you're gung-ho about it, and then start something else, and you're gung-ho about it, and you start something else. This calendar will let you like stay gung-ho about things because you're like, oh, today's Tuesday. I'm going to check in with these kids on this. And I'm make sure I do this. So I think this is going to be probably the biggest takeaway in terms of like what you'll be doing better, like how this is going to make your practice better. Is taking all those great ideas and just formalizing them so you do them regularly.
Yeah. And keeping myself like, I guess, accountable.
It's partly like grounded. Like I think we've talked about the tendency to say like, this is going well, let's move on. Whereas this makes sure that you are like looking to see, is it actually going well enough to remove it from what I planned before? And I think that like, extra bit of effort that it requires to move it might be like, we'll just do it. And then it'll be good practice for everyone. So we've addressed this. We talked about the problem context. I think, let's talk very briefly about estimation. So question 28. You said students don't make an estimate to see if their answer is reasonable, or they leave out the zero, or they straight up don't know how to divide. And those are all possibilities, right? So your response was to teach kids to estimate sums and products first. So I think like if we look at this, problem 28, and then we look at it right next to problem 32, I think something else actually comes up. So this is 28, right? And then this is 32. So like, what does seeing these two next to each other make you think of, if anything?
Like, if I remember it, like, kids did well on this problem. Tuition was 56%, but overall, like, it was 83% for the school.
So 56 Georgia Tech on this one. And then what about 28?
28 was 25%.
Okay. Right. So partly like the operation here is much harder. But I do think there's a similarity in that like, if you look at the kids who are getting this right, many of them are like solving this algebraically, and some of them are going back to check. If you look at who's doing this right, I don't know why in the world you would solve this and then not check it. Like it's just straight up multiplication, so let's just multiply that by what we got and see if we end up with what we thought we would. So the big takeaway here is that it's actually not so much about solving the equation, it's that it's just about like actually going back to check your work. So you may already be working on this. I'm just curious, like what work are you currently putting into having kids check their work?
I'm not, and so like that's a good thing.
So how do you formalize that for kids? Other than saying, because like you could say check your work. I'm assuming I've said it at some point.
Yes.
Right.
I think one is just like explicitly modeling it for the skill, whatever you're working on. Providing space for them, but that just seems like that just doesn't seem to build the habit. It just seems to be like this is a hoop I have to go through. Like there's at least in the past, like for me, I haven't made a like real habit changing thing.
Yeah.
Kids like when it's not there, they don't do it.
What if? So we talked about like the errors that can just kill a kid's work. What if that were one of the errors? Like if you solved an algebraic problem and did not substitute in, like then your assignment is worth a 0. I mean, kids would do it then. They would at least like make an attempt, right? And you have to be careful of the things that you're like really gonna take a stand on. But I'm saying this may be one of those things. Where you say like, if I don't see that you plugged in your final value to the equation to see if the equation is true, then you're going to get a 0 on the assignment. Just because then it's going to really encourage kids to build that habit. It's a great habit. Like, I don't know why on any standardized test, when you have any time left over at the end, you wouldn't do that. Like, that's exactly what you should be doing with your time. It's going back and substituting in to see if you were right.